Republic of Korea, which has been a particular target of his criticism, his unfair demands, and his threats over the past 4 years. But the challenges in the East Asia Pacific region for the new US president will require more than just reassurance and a restoration of traditional approaches. The regional geopolitical environment has changed markedly in the last 4 years. Challenges, threats, and uncertainties have multiplied in the absence of strong US leadership and without the traditional American commitment to alliances and multilateral solutions to shared problems. The first challenge on my list is, I think, the greatest one that the president faces, and that is China. The longstanding US consensus that once advocated cooperation, engagement, constructive relations, and an emphasis on shared interests between Washington and Beijing has collapsed. It has been replaced by a widespread fear of China's intentions and concern that the PRC's geopolitical trajectory may be putting it on a collision course with the United States. Today, relations between the United States and China are frankly in free fall. China's embrace of illiberalism, its use of economic and military coercion in the region, its unsavory trade practices, and evident determination to replace the United States as the region's dominant actor are now the main focus of US concern. But even under the best of circumstances, US-China relations seem destined to be characterized by mutual suspicion and intense competition for many years to come. And how a Biden administration manages this will be a major test of its diplomatic skill. The central challenge for President Biden will be how to project firmness and strength while preventing relations with China from worsening to the point of confrontation. A related challenge will be how to develop an effective multilateral approach to the PRC that does not require forcing regional partners to have to choose between the United States and China. Such a choice would be anathema to most countries in the region, including some US allies. The Biden administration will surely be tough in responding to Chinese coercive practices. It will be firm in opposing attempts to illicitly acquire sensitive US technologies, and it will be forthright in opposing Beijing's quest for regional dominance. The Biden administration will be a vocal critic of China's domestic crackdown on human rights and dissent, its repression of the Uyghur minority, and Beijing's attempts to end democracy and curtail basic rights in Hong Kong. And we should also look for a Biden administration to be tough on trade, although I think it is likely to recognize, as most experts do, that an across-the-board decoupling of the two economies is neither desirable nor even possible. In pursuing this course, the Biden administration will seek to build regional coalitions of like-minded countries to send a message of unity to China. However, the administration seems likely to stop well short of creating a region-wide anti-China military alliance or another mechanism aimed purely at containing the PRC. Strategic flexibility and tactical agility, not reflexive anti-China nationalism, I think will be the main characteristics of the Biden approach. Simultaneously, we should expect a Biden administration to explore ways to cooperate with the PRC in areas of mutual interest as a way of reducing tensions and stabilizing relations. Possible areas of cooperation include managing the COVID-19 pandemic and other global health threats, contending with climate change, and dealing with anti-terrorism. Cooperation on the Korean Peninsula may prove difficult, however, since there are signs that Beijing has come to terms with the idea of a nuclear-armed North Korea, and China is now prioritizing improving ties with Pyongyang over denuclearization. Just a word about Taiwan while we're talking about China, because I see Taiwan as a potential flashpoint in relations between Washington and Beijing. As those relations have deteriorated, tensions over Taiwan have escalated. In the face of Beijing's suppression of democracy in Hong Kong and its use of economic and diplomatic levers and displays of military force to try to intimidate Taiwan, the current US administration has stepped up its rhetorical and practical support for Taiwan and its democracy. That, I believe, is going to continue in the Biden administration, and it should. But even as it provides support and assurances to Taiwan, the new administration is also likely to be more cautious about crossing any of Beijing's red lines when it comes to developing more formal ties with Taiwan. So how to strike the right balance in this area will be a key test for the Biden administration. Now let me turn briefly to a subject near and dear to my heart, and that is the US Republic of Korea alliance. Joe Biden has said that America's alliances will be at the core of his approach to dealing with the regional and global challenges the United States faces. During the past 4 years, the United States has been led by a president who has regularly questioned the value of these alliances and reserved some of his most caustic and accusatory rhetoric for the leaders of allied nations. He once asked his senior national security and defense team, "Why do we even have troops in Korea?" Think about that. President Trump made clear he did not share the deep personal and moral commitment to our alliances that every American president in this century has espoused, and the previous century has espoused for 2 generations. That approach to allies and alliances is going to come to an end on January 20th. In Asia, a Biden administration will view regional challenges through the prism of America's alliances. And as the president-elect said in an article carried by the Korean media several weeks ago, there will be no more extortion of or threats directed at our Korean ally. As president, Joe Biden will recognize that the ROK makes the greatest per capita commitment to its defense of any ally and fields an impressive array of forces on the front line with North Korea. A Biden administration is going to offer an opportunity early on to bring the contentious SMA burden sharing talks to a swift conclusion. In my understanding, there is already an offer on the table that would allow the 2 sides to wrap these talks up on a win-win basis early in the new administration. There are other alliance issues that will also require careful attention. I expect the new administration will press for the full and unimpeded deployment of THAAD, especially if North Korea carries out new missile tests in the coming months. On OPCON transfer, I don't find much support at all among experts, including those who may join the new administration, for a transfer of operational control before the ROK has acquired the capabilities essential to making OPCON transfer possible. And on China, the Biden administration will be sensitive, I think, to Korea's dilemma about joining any coalition designed to restrain China. A Biden administration is unlikely to pursue a "you are either with us or against us" approach. And as I suggested earlier, it will deal with the rift with China more adroitly and strategically than the current administration has. Nevertheless, I think Seoul is going to have to be mindful of the need to demonstrate to Washington that it shares the same values and principles as the United States and others, as they all seek to build a region that is peaceful, prosperous, free, and open. While I'm talking about alliances, let me also address the Korea-Japan issue. Another challenge for the new US administration will be the inability of the ROK and Japan to stabilize their relations. If America's posture in the region depends on the strength of its alliances, and that will be a fundamental principle of the Biden administration, then the continuing enmity and mistrust between Washington's 2 Northeast Asian allies can only undermine America's ability to preserve peace and stability in the region. So putting that another way, a cooperative relationship between Seoul and Tokyo is essential if the United States is to deal successfully with the threat posed by North Korea. I expect the incoming Biden administration will find an opportunity to make that point to our Korean and Japanese allies in the coming months. Now let me turn to North Korea, or as I like to call it, the problem from hell. We've already seen a change in tone by the Biden team when it comes to North Korea. The rhetoric has been sharper and tougher. That already distinguishes the new administration's emerging approach from that of the current president, whose praise for the North Korean leader has been embarrassingly obsequious. In the next administration, the mechanics of interaction with North Korea will also change. President-elect Biden will not engage in unprepared, unproductive summitry with Kim Jong-un, although he has also carefully avoided slamming the door on a summit if such a meeting would lead to real progress on the nuclear issue. The Biden administration will support principled dialogue with North Korea, but the days of made-for-television events like the Singapore summit are over. Instead, we should expect an emphasis on quiet dialogue and actual progress, rather than creating the illusion of progress on the nuclear issue. We can also expect an emphasis on conventional diplomacy with North Korea in the coming months, in which officials from both sides explore the issues and their differences and try to shape agreements and understandings for consideration by the highest levels. Biden's foreign policy and national security team will include veterans of previous administrations. This will include officials from the Obama era, including people who convinced President Obama to turn away from the so-called strategic patience approach and instead implement a pressure and sanctions-based approach late in President Obama's tenure. President Biden seems likely to follow that tougher approach, although I don't think we will find him to be a reflexive hardliner. But Biden will begin his term in office heavily burdened by the legacy of Trump's approach on North Korea during the past 4 years. The essence of that Trump approach was his willingness to look the other way as North Korea expanded its nuclear arsenal and tested short and medium-range ballistic missiles. And Trump appeared content as long as Kim Jong-un just refrained from nuclear weapons tests and testing long-range missiles. The reality is that there has been no actual progress on denuclearization during the past 4 years. North Korea has in fact expanded its nuclear arsenal and tested or deployed dangerous new medium and long-range ballistic missiles. Some experts, including me, long ago concluded that the Trump approach basically seemed to accept the inevitability of a permanently nuclear-armed North Korea. A Biden administration will have to contend with this uncomfortable legacy and find a way of making clear to North Korea that America is not going to stand by as the DPRK expands its nuclear arsenal. How to do so without recreating the fire and fury crisis of 2017 will be a challenge. I expect the Biden administration will rely on tough sanctions and other pressure to raise the cost of Pyongyang of its continued pursuit of nuclear weapons. The new US administration will also emphasize close cooperation and solidarity with its Korean and Japanese allies, in contrast to the unilateralist approach of Trump. But the stark reality the Biden administration will face is that the goal of denuclearizing North Korea seems to be more difficult to achieve than ever. Pyongyang is deeply wedded to its nuclear deterrent, and Kim Jong-un is convinced that these weapons are essential to his regime's survival. Some US experts today argue it is too late to denuclearize North Korea. Instead, they suggest the United States seek to manage the North Korean threat through deterrence, enhanced defense, international cooperation, and efforts to negotiate caps or other limitations on the North's arsenal. Some experts have all but given up on denuclearization and instead argue that an arms control approach is best in dealing with the North's nuclear program. To be frank, such talk is music to Pyongyang's ears, as North Korea has long urged the United States to agree to mutual arms control talks, since these talks would be premised on US acceptance of the North's arsenal. All of this argues for the need for a more effective strategy to convince or compel Pyongyang to give up its nuclear arsenal, And one of the first orders of business for a new administration will be to carry out a policy review aimed at crafting such a strategy. But as I said earlier, the legacy of the current administration's approach will loom heavily over this review. In Singapore, Kim Jong-un convinced the American president to accept North Korea's language on denuclearization in the joint statement. You remember that phrase, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That phrase, of course, does not mean North Korea's denuclearization. In Singapore, President Trump unilaterally and without consultation ended US-ROK joint military exercises. Donald Trump's critical remarks about South Korea and the US-ROK alliance sent a shockwave through the ROK. And that too was music to the ears of the North Koreans. And as was mentioned earlier, the US president has shown a troubling willingness to tolerate North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile buildup. All of that is going to come to an end on January 20th. Let me wrap up my remarks by suggesting several things the Biden administration might do early on to manage relations with North Korea and keep tensions from escalating. I can do it in 8 points. First, moderate, tone down the rhetoric. Calling Kim Jong-un a thug may make you feel good, but it sets the wrong tone and compels the North Koreans to respond in kind. Second, establish a quiet communication channel to Pyongyang as soon as possible. Third, ensure that Pyongyang understands that while the incoming US administration will defend itself, its allies, and its interests, the door to negotiations is open. Fourth, make clear to Pyongyang that denuclearization is still the firm goal of US policy. Fifth, ensure that Pyongyang understands that the United States is prepared to take significant steps, including sanctions easing, in return for clear, irreversible steps by North Korea to reduce its nuclear and ballistic missile arsenal. Sixth, assure Pyongyang that the United States is prepared to accept, work with, and normalize relations with a non-nuclear armed North Korea. Seventh, propose that US and North Korean officials meet early on for exploratory discussions about ways to improve bilateral relations. And eighth and finally, inform North Korea that the new US president is ready to appoint a very senior US presidential envoy, a prominent figure, who would be responsible for talks with North Korea and who would personally represent and report directly to the American president. Let me wrap up there by saying thank you for the opportunity to share my views with you. And I look forward to responding to your questions and engaging in a conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Evans, for your brilliant opening speech with some practical recommendations as well. Now, before opening our Q&A session, I'm delighted to invite a few special guests, starting with Mr. Sung Ki-hak, Chairman and CEO of the Youngwon Group. Chairman Sung is a very highly respected business leader, as well as known for his generous philanthropic efforts. He serves as a member of the International Advisory Council at Brookings Institution, where you are now, and also as a board director of IGE, our institution over here in Seoul. Let's welcome Chairman Sung.
Mr. Revere, with Dr. John, it's very nice to, even virtually meet you. It's a long time since I saw you in Washington, D.C. Thank you for replying my, list of questions I have made. I was really impressed, how soon you came back to me. Thank you.
That's why I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Really? Well, if I'm given a few minutes, then I like to say a few words for your, assessment or your answer. That some people or historians search that negotiations with North Korea brings very little or nothing. so far. So I think military preparedness, as well as economic sanction and the human rights awareness promotion program for North Korea, North Korean people will ultimately bring maybe peace or freedom to the North Korean people. I don't know how new administration will handle this matter, but this is some of us are sharing this opinion. So what is your opinion about this kind of idea here?
I agreed with everything that you just said. I don't think there are any differences between us, Chairman Song. I am hopeful that because there are so many experienced people on the Biden team, people who have been through this before, there will be people going all the way back to the Clinton administration who've worked on these issues and have expressed directly the disappointments of our past negotiations with North Korea. As I have, my experience with them goes back to the negotiations in the Clinton era. And I have become convinced over the years that we've tried virtually everything in dealing with North Korea. We've tried to be the good cop, we've tried to be the bad cop. We've put sanctions on, we've taken sanctions off. We've applied pressure, we've taken pressure off. We've talked about normalization of relations. As you may know, Chairman Zhang, I was supposed to be the first head of the US liaison office in Pyongyang. That never happened, and it never happened because the North Koreans were not interested in it. So we've had tremendous disappointment over the years. But of all the things that we've tried that have not worked, there's one thing that we haven't tried that might work. And I alluded to it in my remarks. And what I call, the thing that I call massive pressure is required in order to get Kim Jong-un's attention and convince him that the thing that he thinks is going to preserve and save his regime could actually have the opposite effect. And the way to do that is to demonstrate to him that we have the capacity to shake the foundations of his regime through the application of what I call massive pressure: economic, military, trade, diplomatic, sanctions, covert things. And he will get the message. He's a lot of things, but he's also rational, and he's also a survivor. And if we are able to convince him that nuclear weapons are not his salvation, but could lead to the collapse of his regime, I think at the end of the day, he might just make the right decision. We've never tried this before. Maybe it's time to do that.
Thank you.
We all hope you're right, Evans. And I hope Kim Jong-un is listening to what you have just said.
Oh, he's heard this from me before. His senior staff has heard this from me before. But let me also take this opportunity to thank Chairman Sung for his incredible generosity and his friendship that he's extended to Brookings over the years. He's been a great supporter of ours, and I wouldn't be here and others wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support of people like him. And I want to extend my compliments to you and thanks, and also Jonathan Pollock, who is my brother in arms in this business, also.
Oh yes, Jonathan. Yes. Strove, Martin, and Jonathan. Richard Bush. They were all good friends of ours. Yes.
And good friends of mine too.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Anything else, Chairman Song?
Well, recently I find the political, social fabrics of North Korea is either collapsing or disintegrating. I think there are lots of things are happening out there, and I don't think North Korea has enough energy or power to negotiate with the US for the time being. So rather also Biden administration has little time to do this one for now because of your COVID and all in internal program there. I believe this is something is happening here and there. Yeah, that's my final remarks here. Yeah.
good point.
Okay. Any comment, Evans? You have on,
No, I
on
would
that?
agree that
Okay.
North Korea is in trouble across several dimensions right now. The COVID-19 pandemic, the catastrophic drop in trade with China, domestic economic mismanagement, weather issues, etc. North Korea is struggling right now. But once again, when it comes to making mischief, they're specialists in this, and we have to be prepared for any possibility.
Okay, all right. As usual, crisis could generate opportunity. Hope North Korea can take this crisis as something positive for the future of this Korean Peninsula. Thank you very much, Chairman Song.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a few questions coming from chatting by participants in this webinar. Starting with a question, I think this is a U.S. Republic of Korea alliance-related question. As you may know, Evans, Korea's National Assembly, led by the ruling Democratic Party, has just passed a bill to ban anti-North Korea leaflets. That appears to raise an issue between two countries. Obviously, some politicians in the States have expressed deep concerns over what's been happening here in Korea. This is directly related to human rights issues in the North. And also the issue has been raised by various corners in South Korea as well, including some North Korean defectors also. So what is your thought on this, and how serious, if you like, this development is, and what sort of measures need to be done to make sure that we have trusted alliance between the U.S. and Korea?
This is the 51st year that I've been working on U.S.-Korea relations. That'll tell you a little bit about how old I am. And one of the reasons I've survived so long is that I speak very frankly to my Korean friends, and sincerely and helpfully about issues when they arise, so that we can get them fixed and move on. I saw the reports of the National Assembly's vote, and the kindest word that I could use to describe that outcome is disappointing. I was extremely disappointed by that vote and the signal that it sends, because those leaflets and pamphlets and things that cross the border are ways of extending hope to many people in North Korea. I've talked to North Koreans who've been on the receiving end of some of those pamphlets and other materials that cross the border. And they have said to me very pointedly that when they received these things, they knew that someone cared about them and someone was giving them reason to hope that someday they would be out from under the heel of this brutal regime. And the National Assembly has basically outlawed the possibility of extending that hope. And I think that's, as I said, disappointing to say the least. And I believe it is going to be a problematic issue between the United States and the ROK. There are a number of areas when it comes to North Korea where Washington and Seoul don't see eye to eye. That's not a secret. I think many people know that. When it comes to sanctions implementation, when it comes to a peace regime, when it comes to the pace and scope of diplomacy, it's pretty easy to see that over the last 4 years, Washington and Seoul have not always been on the same page. And I think on this issue, Washington and Seoul are not going to be on the same page. And I would expect that there will be people, particularly those who are strong human rights advocates in the Biden administration, who will look with concern about this. And so my advice to my Korean friends is we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with this because the decision by the National Assembly, and I respect their decision, But that decision is not going to sit well in many quarters in Washington.
Okay, thank you for your comment and response. Moving on to Korea-Japan relations. You're the expert on Japanese issues as well. Now, as you know, the Korea-Japan relationship is, on the very low side, to say the least. Has deteriorated in recent years. Now, any practical suggestion to Korean side as well as Japanese side to make a headway to this very undesirable, unproductive relationship between two countries?
I spent many years in Korea. I spent many years in Japan, 8 consecutive years serving in Japan, next to Mike Mansfield, the famous former US ambassador to Japan. I'm in second place in terms of consecutive years spent in Japan. So I know both countries well. I speak both languages. I have friends in both countries of long standing. And I have tremendous respect for both societies and cultures and the complexity and the difficulty that the two countries have been through. My first comment beyond that would be to refer back to what I said in my remarks, that when South Korea and Japan are not getting along, it undermines a key security objective of the United States, which is to present a united front in dealing with North Korea and other security challenges in Northeast Asia. And I can't remind my Korean and Japanese friends often enough that that's the reality, that this may be a problem between the two of you, but it creates a problem for us. But the next point is that it's not the United States that needs to make a proposal or to serve as the arbiter between the two sides. There's a lot of history between Korea and Japan that Koreans and Japanese need to get their heads around and need to find a way to move past some of the tragic history and terrible history of the past. I was in Korea when Kim Dae-jung was president, and it was marvelous to see the job that he did with his Japanese counterparts in stabilizing Japan-Korea relations, as no other president did before. He was a man of the left. He was a progressive president. He was a man who had every reason to be as caustic in his criticism of Japan as others. But not only did he not do that, he and his Japanese counterparts led a process of reconciliation that helped turn the corner in Japan-Korea relations. That is the model, I think, that perhaps wise people in Tokyo and Seoul should look to as they try to get things back on track. There's a lot of history here, and I understand it. There is a lot of bitterness. I understand that too. Half of my family is Korean. I understand the history here. But it's time to move beyond that, not forget the history, but put it in a particular place and then try to move beyond it by building the sort of constructive and mutually supportive and mutually respectful relationship that the two countries are capable of. And we've seen that they're capable of it from what happened during the Kim Dae-jung presidency.
Okay, thank you for your great point. Now, before we close, I think I cannot finish without asking a question on China. It's such a big issue, as you said early on, that perhaps the most important issue is between not only US and China, but also entire free world and authoritarian regime, if you like. Now, this question may be a bit beyond what your sort of expertise in diplomatic or geopolitical issues, but what is at stake, I think, as far as I can see, is also the economic supremacy is at stake between G2 countries. Now, in your view, it's a rather wild question. Do you envision China to become G1 in a decade or two of whatever time frame you like? Is it feasible goal for China to achieve that? It's not just economic, but economic, political, military superpower replacing United States in our life?
I served in China during the high tide of economic reform and opening. I was working in the economic section, which was a wonderful place to be working in China back during that period. And my specialty was going out into the countryside and watching the Chinese Communist Party dismantle socialism in the countryside in China during that era under Deng Xiaoping and Zhao Ziyang and Hu Yaobang and others. And it was a marvelous thing. And I was writing telegrams going back to Washington, reporting what was going on and telling people that something amazing was happening that would transform the face of China and transform China's position in the world. And overwhelmingly, my colleagues back in Washington were telling me that I was crazy. It turns out I was right. And it turns out that there was this massive transformation. And it has brought China to the point where it is a leader or a co-leader or a would-be leader in so many areas of technology and trade and commerce and development. But what made China grow so fast was the willingness to discard the old authoritarian system, the dictatorship of one man, the state-centric, lethargic economic system that it had been laboring under for the better part of 40, 45 years or so. And getting rid of all that is what led to this outburst of growth and development and energy, et cetera. But what Xi Jinping is doing is turning back the clock. Turning back the clock to one-man rule, turning back the clock to authoritarianism, cracking down on all the forces of Chinese-style liberalism that helped bring the economy to where it is today, and cracking down on the internet and the sharing of information, the sharing of knowledge, the free exchange of ideas, et cetera. And I don't know how you can aspire to be G1 if what you are doing is undoing the very things that created this spectacular growth and development in China. That's what he's doing. And so I think Xi Jinping is laying the seeds for the failure, quite frankly, of the Chinese economy in the coming years. I know that sounds a little strange to say that when China is doing so well, but you cannot have a world's leading economy that is trying to implement 1950s style Maoist, Stalinist, authoritarian practices in politics, in economics, and in industry, and in development. It just doesn't work. And I think the Chinese are going to find out the hard way. That's my prediction.
All right, thank you.
I'll come back in 50 years and see if I'm right.
Okay, all right. Let's get together in 50 years, you said, 30 years or so.
I look forward to it.
Right. In fact, my own experience with China goes back to about 30 years during my days at the World Bank. I had a similar experience like yours. You know, at that time, I was traveling quite a bit to Beijing and Shanghai to advise government officials to plan on transforming the economy into a market-driven economy at that time. And I had high hope for their sustained growth and they demonstrated a remarkable achievement over the years. But lately, I'm beginning to be more concerned about how sustainable the regime could be for its economy, and for its growing role in the world, and even for his own people. So we all hope that China will remain healthy and supportive, not only for its own country, or neighboring countries.
If you have a second, can I share one very quick anecdote?
Okay. Of course.
I was sitting in a little restaurant in the middle of Manchuria in 1983. I was on an economic reporting mission. And I was sitting there having a bowl of soup and something to drink, and there were a couple of Chinese peasants sitting at the next table. And I wanted to strike up a conversation with them. I speak Chinese. And I said in my most fluent Beijing accent, 中国发展了很快. China has developed really fast. And one of them, who had been drinking quite a bit, looked at me and he said, 将来我们要发黄. He said, in the future, we're going to develop into nothing. The cynicism was already there about where China might be going in the form of this poor peasant in the middle of Manchuria.
When was it, you said?
This is 1983.
Okay, now it's time to close, but as we close this great webinar with you, Evans, I would like to, I took a note of a part of your opening speech, which was a very touch, in a sense. Is for the true alliance between Korea and United States. You mentioned something like Seoul has to be mindful of the need to demonstrate to Washington that it shares the same values and principles as the United States and others as they seek to build a region that is peaceful, prosperous, free, and open. I thank you very much for that that remark. I think that is the quote of the day from this webinar today. I would like to thank you very much for taking the time. This very late hour over there, disrupting your cocktail. Would have enjoyed otherwise. But certainly, I very much look forward to seeing you in person next year, perhaps with vaccines.
That's my plan as well. You've been very kind, and thank you very much.
Okay.
My thanks to all of your good colleagues for their great questions and comments, and it's been an honor to participate in this.
Okay, thank you very much. Take care. Okay.
Take care and good night, everybody.
Stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Same to you. Take care.
Okay.
안녕히
Bye.
가십시오.